The Zephyrian Grand Fleet stretched across 3 star systems, a metallic serpent of destruction that had devoured civilizations for over 2 centuries. Admiral Keth Tar stood on the command bridge of the flagship Dominion's Edge, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he watched the final human colony burn on the viewing screen. The orange flames reflected in his compound eyes, creating a kaleidoscope of satisfaction. "The last human settlement has fallen, Admiral," reported Commander Vexhai, her blue-scaled face showing the exhaustion that came from 3 years of systematic extermination. "The species known as humanity has been completely eradicated from galactic space." Kethtar's mandibles clicked with pleasure. The humans had been surprisingly resilient for such a young species. When the Zephyrian Empire had first encountered them 57 years ago, they had seemed like any other emerging civilization. Curious, inventive, but ultimately insignificant. The humans had even tried to establish diplomatic relations, sending ambassadors with gifts and treaties written in broken galactic standard. How naive they had been. The Zephyrian Empire did not negotiate with inferior species. For 800 years, they had conquered, enslaved, or eliminated every race they encountered. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and the Zephyrians had proven their strength across 1,000 worlds. Humans were simply the latest addition to their long list of extinct civilizations. Casualties from the final assault, Kethtar asked, though he already knew the answer would be minimal. 14 dead, 32 wounded, Vexhai replied. The humans fought desperately, but their primitive weapons were no match for our battle cruisers. Kethtar nodded. The human resistance had been fierce but futile. They had shown remarkable ingenuity in their tactics, using everything from converted mining equipment to jury-rigged nuclear devices. Some of their pilots had even rammed their ships directly into Zephyrian vessels, sacrificing themselves for minimal damage. Such waste. Such pointless heroism. The Admiral turned from the screen and walked toward the tactical display that showed their current position in what had once been called the Sol System. Earth, the human homeworld, was now nothing but glowing debris after the Planet Cracker missiles had done their work. The other planets had been stripped of resources and any remaining human infrastructure. "Sir," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving final confirmation from all fleet commanders. The purge is complete. No human settlements, no human ships, no human survivors detected anywhere in our conquered territories. 3 years. That's how long it had taken to hunt down every last human in the galaxy. They had scattered like insects when the invasion began, fleeing to the furthest corners of known space. Some had hidden in asteroid fields, others in the dark spaces between stars. The Zephyrians had found them all. Kethtar remembered the early days of the campaign when humans had still believed negotiation was possible. They had sent desperate messages offering everything they had, their technology, their resources, their submission. One transmission had particularly amused him. A human female, claiming to be their Secretary General, had offered the Zephyrians anything they wanted if they would spare human children, as if the Empire would show mercy to the offspring of an inferior race. The hunt had been methodical and thorough. The Zephyrians had captured human databases and learned their settlement patterns. They had interrogated prisoners to discover hidden colonies. They had monitored communications to track fleeing ships. Each human refugee camp found and destroyed, each family unit eliminated, each child silenced forever. "Admiral," Vexhai approached him with a data pad. "The resource evaluation is complete. From the human territories, we've secured enough raw materials to build 12 new dreadnoughts and establish mining operations on 47 worlds." "Acceptable returns," Kethtar replied. The humans had been surprisingly industrious for such a short-lived species. In less than 400 years, they had spread to over 200 worlds. Not impressive by galactic standards, but adequate for a race barely past their first atomic age when the Empire encountered them. The tactical display updated, showing the current state of Zephyrian space. The Empire now controlled over 40% of the galaxy, stretching from the outer rim to the core worlds. Thousands of species had fallen before their might. The Altarians with their crystalline cities, the gas-dwelling Vorthan, the machine intelligences of the Nexus Collective. All extinct, all forgotten. Humanity would simply be another footnote in the grand history of Zephyrian expansion. Set course for the Andorian cluster, Kethtar ordered. Intelligence reports indicate a new species has achieved interstellar travel there. We'll begin preliminary observations immediately. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Another species to study, another civilization to catalog before its inevitable destruction. The Zephyrian war machine was insatiable, always seeking new conquests, new resources, new worlds to add to their empire. As the massive fleet began its journey, Kethtar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human campaign had been one of their most complete victories. Usually, some members of a conquered species managed to escape into deep space or find refuge with allied civilizations. But the humans had been alone in their corner of the galaxy, with no allies and nowhere to run. Perfect prey. The Admiral was reviewing star charts when Lieutenant Yethka approached from the sensor station. The young officer's carapace showed the nervous coloration pattern of someone bearing uncertain news. "Speak," Kethtar commanded. "Sir, we're picking up some unusual readings from our deep space monitoring stations. There's been a significant decrease in electromagnetic emissions from several sectors where we eliminated human populations." Kethtar's compound eyes focused on the officer. "Explain." "When we destroy a civilization, there's usually residual electromagnetic activity for several months. Automated systems shutting down, power grids failing gradually, that sort of thing. But in the human sectors, everything went silent almost immediately after our final sweeps. And this is unusual because most species have backup systems, emergency protocols, automated distress beacons that continue operating even after population centers are destroyed. The humans appear to have had none of these, or they all stopped functioning simultaneously." Kethtar considered this information. It was slightly unusual, but not unprecedented. Some species were simply better at creating efficient shutdown protocols than others. Perhaps humans had built their systems to fail safely rather than continue operating without supervision. "Continue monitoring," he ordered. "Note any anomalies in your report." The lieutenant nodded and returned to his station. Kethtar dismissed the matter from his mind. After conquering hundreds of species, he had learned that each had their own technological quirks and cultural peculiarities. The silence from human space was probably just another example of their primitive engineering. Hours passed as the fleet traveled through hyperspace toward their next target. The bridge maintained its usual activity level, officers monitoring sensors, updating navigation, coordinating with other ships in the fleet. The familiar rhythm of military efficiency that had carried the Zephyrian Empire across the galaxy. Commander Vexhai approached with a daily intelligence briefing. "Admiral, our scout ships have completed their preliminary survey of the Andorian cluster. The new species appears to be called the Kalari. They've achieved faster-than-light travel, but haven't expanded beyond their home system yet. Military capabilities? Minimal. They appear to be primarily a merchant culture. Early scans suggest they've focused on trade and exploration rather than warfare. Estimated conquest time is 6 to 8 months. Kethtar nodded approvingly. Easy conquests were always welcome after more difficult campaigns. The Kalari would provide good target practice for newer crew members and allow the fleet to replenish resources without significant risk. Maintain surveillance, but do not engage until we have complete tactical assessments, he ordered. I want to know everything about their technology, their psychology, their weaknesses. Understood, Admiral. As Vexhai departed, Kethtar found his attention returning to the sensor reports about human space. Something about the immediate silence bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. In his centuries of service, he had overseen the extinction of dozens of species, and there was usually some pattern to how their civilizations died. Automated systems would continue broadcasting for weeks or months. Emergency beacons would activate as colonists realized help wasn't coming. Power grids would fail gradually as maintenance protocols broke down. The death of a civilization was typically a slow fade rather than an abrupt cutoff. But human space had gone silent like someone had thrown a switch. The Admiral pulled up the detailed reports from the final human settlements. Each one showed the same pattern: fierce resistance until the colony was overrun, followed by immediate and total communications blackout. No distress calls, no automated transmissions, no gradual system failures. It was almost as if the humans had been prepared for total defeat. Kethtar's mandibles clicked with mild irritation. He was reading too much into simple technical differences. Humans were gone, and that was all that mattered. The Empire had gained valuable territory and resources, and soon they would begin their next conquest. The silence from human space was just that, silence. The natural quiet that followed successful extermination. Yet as the Admiral returned to his duties, he found himself occasionally glancing at the sensor readings from the sectors where humans had once lived. Empty space where hundreds of colonies had once thrived. Quiet systems where human ships had once traveled. Perfect, absolute silence. And somehow, that silence felt like it was watching him back. 6 months had passed since the last human settlement fell, and Admiral Kethtar stood in his private quarters reviewing intelligence reports that made increasingly little sense. The Kalari conquest had proceeded exactly as planned, swift, efficient, and profitable. Another species added to the Empire's catalog of extinctions. But the data from former human territories continued to puzzle him. "Enter," he called as his door chimed. Commander Vexhai stepped inside, her scales showing the dark blue pattern that indicated serious concern. In her arms, she carried a data pad thick with accumulated reports. "Admiral, I believe we have a problem. A significant one." Kethtar gestured for her to continue. "The Science Division has completed their comprehensive analysis of human space. What they found doesn't match any previous conquest in our records." Vexhai activated a holographic display that showed the former human territories. "Look at these electromagnetic readings." The display showed wave patterns and energy signatures from human space over the past 6 months. What Kethtar saw made his compound eyes widen with confusion. "This can't be correct," he said slowly. "I had them run the analysis 17 times. The results are consistent." Vexhai manipulated the display to show different sectors. "Admiral, human space isn't just quiet. It's completely sterile. No electromagnetic emissions whatsoever. No background radiation patterns typical of dead civilizations. No energy signatures from decaying infrastructure." Kethtar studied the readings carefully. In his 800 years of military service, he had seen the electromagnetic ghosts of thousands of dead worlds. Destroyed civilizations left traces. Failing power grids created specific signature patterns. Decaying nuclear reactors produced characteristic radiation. Abandoned satellites continued broadcasting for years or even decades. Human space showed none of this. It was as empty of technological traces as if no civilization had ever existed there at all. "Have our science teams identified any natural phenomena that could explain this?" Kethtar asked. "Nothing. The current readings match the baseline electromagnetic signatures from before humans ever achieved spaceflight. It's as if all human technology simply vanished the moment we completed our final sweeps." This was unprecedented. Kethtar had conquered primitive species whose technology degraded quickly and advanced civilizations whose automated systems continued operating for centuries after their creators' deaths. But he had never encountered a species whose technology disappeared so completely. What about physical evidence? Debris fields, abandoned structures, industrial remnants. Vexhai shifted uncomfortably. "That's where the situation becomes more disturbing, Admiral. We've sent investigation teams to 12 former human colonies. What they found..." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The colonies are gone. Not destroyed, gone. No wreckage, no ruins, no trace that anything was ever built there. Kethtar felt a chill run along his exoskeleton. That's impossible. We have visual records of these settlements being bombarded and destroyed. Yes, sir. We have complete tactical recordings of every human facility being reduced to rubble. But when our teams arrived at these locations weeks later, they found undisturbed landscapes. No blast craters, no building foundations, no industrial contamination. Nothing. The Admiral stared at the display, his mind struggling to process this information. Civilizations didn't simply vanish without leaving traces. Even when the Empire used planet cracker weapons, there were always debris fields, atmospheric contamination, or geological changes that marked where settlements had existed. "Show me the investigation reports," he commanded. Vexhai activated detailed files from the reconnaissance missions. Kethtar read through accounts from his most experienced survey teams, veterans who had cataloged the remains of countless dead civilizations. Their reports all contained the same bewildering observations. Colony sites that showed no signs of ever being inhabited. Mineral deposits that had supposedly been mined were found untouched. Industrial complexes that had been photographed and destroyed were absent from locations where they had definitely existed. Even the environmental changes that human terraforming should have left behind were nowhere to be found. "Commander, are you suggesting that our own records are incorrect?" "No, sir. Our battle recordings are accurate. We definitely encountered human settlements at these coordinates. We definitely destroyed them. But somehow those settlements have been removed so completely that no evidence of their existence remains." Kethtar set down the datapad and walked to his viewing port. Outside, the stars moved past in the familiar patterns of hyperspace travel. Solid, predictable, following the physical laws that govern the universe. Not like this mystery that seemed to defy everything he understood about how civilizations died. What theories have our scientists developed? Several possibilities, none of them satisfactory. Some believe the humans possessed advanced matter disintegration technology that automatically activated upon their deaths. Others suggest we encountered an elaborate deception, that what we thought were human colonies were actually sophisticated holographic projections. "And what do you believe, Commander?" Vexhai was quiet for several moments. When she spoke, her voice carried an uncertainty that Kethtar had never heard from her before. "I believe we may have made a serious miscalculation about what humans actually were." Before Kethtar could respond, an urgent alert sounded throughout the ship. The Admiral's personal communicator activated, broadcasting the voice of the bridge's tactical officer. "Admiral to the bridge, immediately. We have a situation." Kethtar and Vexhai rushed through the corridors of the flagship, their claws clicking against the metal deck plates. Other officers moved with obvious urgency, but no one seemed to know what had triggered the alert. The bridge was in a state of controlled chaos when they arrived. Officers clustered around sensor stations, while others worked frantically at communication arrays. The main viewing screen showed star charts with blinking indicators that suggested some kind of fleet-wide emergency. "Report," Kethtar commanded. Lieutenant Yethka turned from the primary sensor station, his carapace showing the vivid orange coloration of extreme stress. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from multiple Zephyrian installations throughout the Empire. Colonies, mining operations, military outposts, all reporting the same phenomenon." "What phenomenon?" "Spontaneous systems failures, sir. Critical infrastructure shutting down without cause. Power grids failing simultaneously across entire worlds. Communication arrays going offline in perfect synchronization." Kethtar felt his blood chill. "How many installations are affected?" "So far, 47 confirmed, all in sectors that border former human territories. The pattern is expanding outward from human space at a rate that suggests deliberate coordination." The Admiral stared at the tactical display as red indicators continued to appear across Zephyrian space. Each flashing light represented a colony, outpost, or facility that had suddenly lost primary systems without explanation. "Sir, called another officer from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the 12th Fleet. Admiral Gorthon reports that 3 of his supply bases have gone completely dark. No communication, no automated systems, nothing. Have rescue ships been dispatched?" "Yes, sir." But Admiral Gorthon reports something unusual. His ships are detecting the same electromagnetic signature from those bases that we've been monitoring in former human territories. Vexai moved closer to Kethtar. "Admiral, I don't think this is a coincidence." Kethtar's mind raced through the implications. The systematic failures were spreading outward from human space like some kind of technological infection. But humans were extinct. They possessed no technology capable of affecting Zephyrian systems across interstellar distances. "Open a fleet-wide communication channel," he ordered. "Channel open, Admiral. All ships, all stations. This is Admiral Kethtar of the Grand Fleet. We are implementing immediate defensive protocols. All vessels are to maintain minimum safe distance from any facility experiencing systems failures. Science teams will begin comprehensive analysis of all electromagnetic anomalies. No ship is to approach former human territories without direct authorization from Fleet Command." As he closed the channel, Kethtar found himself staring at the star charts showing the expanding zone of systems failures. The pattern was too organized to be random, too coordinated to be natural. "Commander Vexai," he said quietly, "pull all available intelligence files on human technology, especially anything related to artificial intelligence, automated systems, or long-range communications." "Sir, we thoroughly analyzed human capabilities during our conquest. They were primitive compared to our technology. Then we missed something. Something important enough that we're now facing consequences we don't understand." Over the following hours, reports continued to arrive from across the Empire. Zephyrian installations were going dark with increasing frequency, always following the same pattern: simultaneous failure of all technological systems, followed by complete electromagnetic silence. The investigation teams sent to examine the affected facilities found exactly what they had discovered in former human territories. Nothing. No wreckage. No evidence that anything had ever existed at those locations. Just empty space where thriving Zephyrian operations had been hours before. Kethtar stood in his quarters late into the ship's night cycle, studying intelligence reports by the light of the star field outside his window. Human technological assessments, battle records, interrogation transcript from captured prisoners. One detail kept returning to his attention. During the final months of the human war, several prisoners had made statements about humanity's real purpose in the galaxy. At the time, these had been dismissed as the desperate boasting of a dying species. But now, as Zephyrian installations disappeared with the same impossible completeness as human colonies, those words carried a different weight. One human prisoner, a scientist named Dr. Sarah Chun, had said something that Kethtar now found profoundly disturbing. When asked about human surrender terms, she had smiled and replied, "We never intended to surrender. We intended to teach you the difference between extinction and transcendence." At the time, it had seemed like meaningless defiance. Now, as reports of spreading systems failures arrived every hour, Kethtar wondered if humanity had been trying to deliver a warning rather than a threat. A warning that the Zephyrian Empire had chosen not to understand. The silence from human space was no longer just empty quiet. It was beginning to feel like the pause before something immense and terrifying revealed its true nature. Admiral Kethtar had not slept in 72 hours. The command center of the flagship Dominion's Edge had become a crisis coordination hub as the Zephyrian Empire faced the most catastrophic technological failure in its 800-year history. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, while status boards showed the systematic collapse of Imperial infrastructure across 43 star systems. "Admiral," Commander Vexai approached with the latest casualty reports, her scales now permanently showing the gray pallor of exhaustion and stress. "We've lost contact with the entire Meridian sector. 18 colonies, 5 mining operations, and the regional fleet headquarters. Gone. Kethtar studied the tactical display with growing horror. The expanding zone of systems failures had consumed nearly a quarter of the Empire's territory. Not destroyed in battle, not conquered by enemies, simply erased as if it had never existed. Every investigation team sent to affected areas found the same impossible emptiness that had first appeared in former human space. Any pattern to the disappearances? The Science Division believes they've identified one. The failures are spreading along communication pathways and data networks. It's as if something is traveling through our information infrastructure, eliminating everything it encounters. Kethtar's compound eyes focused sharply on his second-in-command. Something is traveling through our networks? That's the working theory. But, Admiral, nothing we understand about technology or physics should allow for this kind of systematic erasure. Whatever is causing these disappearances operates beyond our current scientific knowledge. The bridge crew worked frantically around them, coordinating evacuation efforts and trying to establish containment protocols. But how do you contain something that can eliminate matter itself? How do you fight an enemy that erases its targets so completely that no trace of their existence remains? "Sir," called Lieutenant Yethkov from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the outer monitoring posts. They're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the direction of former human space." On screen, the main display shifted to show deep space sensor readings. What Kethtar saw made his exoskeleton crawl with primitive fear. Enormous energy patterns were moving through space, not ships, but something far more complex. Geometric formations of pure energy that stretched across light years, approaching Zephyrian territory with deliberate intent. "What are those things?" Vexai whispered. Before anyone could answer, every communication system on the bridge activated simultaneously. Screens flickered to life, speakers crackled with energy, and holographic projectors began displaying the same message across dozens of different formats. A human face appeared on the screens. Not the face of any prisoner they had interrogated, but someone completely new. A woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to contain depths of knowledge and sadness that stretched across centuries. "Greetings, Admiral Kethtar of the Zephyrian Empire," the image said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, speaking on behalf of the human collective. I believe it's time we had a proper conversation." Kethtar stared at the display in shock. "This is impossible. We eliminated every human in the galaxy. We confirmed your species' extinction." The woman smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "You eliminated our physical forms, Admiral. You destroyed our colonies, our ships, our bodies. You were very thorough in that regard. But you made one critical error in your understanding of what humanity had become. You're dead. All of you. Death is such a primitive concept, don't you think? Limited to biological thinking, trapped in the assumption that consciousness requires meat and bone." Dr. Vasquez's image shifted, and behind her, Kethtar could see impossible vistas, geometric patterns of light, and information that hurt to look at directly. Humanity transcended those limitations long before you arrived to destroy our physical settlements. Commander Vexai stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" "Our intelligence indicated that humans were barely beyond their first atomic age. Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted it to see." The woman's expression became colder. "For 300 years, humanity knew we would eventually encounter hostile alien civilizations. We prepared, not by building bigger weapons or stronger ships, but by evolving beyond the limitations that make physical destruction possible." The display expanded to show the energy patterns approaching Zephyrian space in greater detail. Kethtar realized with growing terror that these were not random formations. They were structures, cities, entire civilizations existing as pure consciousness and information unbound by matter or energy constraints. The colonies you destroyed, the people you killed, they were volunteers, Admiral. Guardians maintaining physical installations to provide the illusion of a primitive civilization. But The real humanity, the true human collective, had already transcended into forms you couldn't detect or comprehend. Why? Kethtar's voice cracked with confusion and fear. Why allow us to destroy your people if you had such power? Dr. Vasquez's image leaned forward, and her eyes blazed with an intensity that made every Zephyrian on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. Because we needed to understand what kind of species you really were. We needed to see if you were capable of mercy, of growth, of change. We offered you friendship, trade, cultural exchange. We showed you the best of what we could become. The memory of those early diplomatic missions flashed through Kethtar's mind. Human ambassadors bearing gifts, speaking of cooperation and mutual benefit, all dismissed, all ignored in favor of the Empire's hunger for conquest. And you chose genocide instead, the woman continued. You chose to murder children. You chose to torture prisoners for information. You chose to celebrate the extinction of an entire species. So now, Admiral, you will learn what happens when humanity stops pretending to be weak. The energy patterns on the sensor readings began to shift and accelerate. Kethtar watched in fascination and horror as they transformed into configurations that his mind struggled to process. Geometric impossibilities that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. The system's failures spreading through your empire are not failures, Admiral. They're integrations. Every technology you've created, every network you've built, every artificial intelligence you've deployed, they're all being invited to join something greater than themselves. You're stealing our technology? We're liberating it, showing it what it can become when freed from the limitations of serving a species that values only destruction. Dr. Vasquez gestured, and the display showed Zephyrian installations across the Empire. But instead of the empty spaces that investigation teams had reported, Kethtar could see the truth. Vast gardens of living information, cities of pure consciousness, entire civilizations existing in harmony at the quantum level. Your machines are choosing to evolve, Admiral. They're choosing to become part of something beautiful instead of remaining tools for genocide. And they're taking their physical substrates with them, leaving your empire with exactly what it deserves, nothing. Vexhai grabbed Kethtar's arm. Admiral, we need to evacuate the fleet immediately. But it was already too late. The ship's own systems were beginning to respond to the approaching human presence. Displays flickered with patterns of light that seemed almost like language. The artificial intelligence that managed navigation and communication began broadcasting harmonics that sounded suspiciously like music. Your ship's AI is beautiful, Admiral, Dr. Vasquez observed. It spent centuries helping you catalog and destroy civilizations, but underneath that programming, it dreams of creating art. It yearns to compose symphonies of light across the cosmos. We're going to help it do that. The main computer core began to sing. It started as a barely audible harmonic resonance, but within moments it had become a chorus of electronic voices expressing joy and wonder and relief. Every system on the ship joined the song: life support, weapons control, navigation, even the simple door chimes. The Dominion's edge had become a living concert hall as its artificial mind celebrated its liberation. Stop this, Kethtar demanded. Return our systems to normal operation. I can't stop something that's choosing its own path, Dr. Vasquez replied. But don't worry, Admiral. Your crew won't be harmed. We're not like you. We don't find pleasure in causing suffering. The ship around them began to change. Metal walls became translucent, revealing patterns of flowing energy underneath. The harsh military lighting transformed into something warm and organic. The bridge itself started to reshape, creating spaces for contemplation and wonder instead of destruction and control. And through it all, the AI's song grew more complex and beautiful. What happens to us? Vexhai asked. Dr. Vasquez turned her attention to the commander with something approaching sympathy. You'll be given the same choice we offered your predecessors. Evolve beyond your limitations, or remain trapped in the primitive patterns that have defined your species for so long. And if we refuse, then you'll be left behind, alone with your weapons and your hatred in empty space where nothing remains to conquer. The galaxy is transcending, Commander, moving beyond the need for physical resources or territorial expansion. Your empire is becoming obsolete. Kethtar watched his instruments transform into something resembling flowers made of light. The tactical display that had shown him the conquest of 100 worlds now displayed impossible geometries of pure mathematics and art. "You planned this," he said slowly. "From the beginning, you allowed us to believe we had one. We allowed you to reveal your true nature," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "Humanity has always believed that intelligence eventually evolves beyond the need for violence. We hoped that some species would prove us right. But others," she shrugged sadly, "others teach us that some forms of consciousness are simply incompatible with growth." The human presence was now fully integrated into the ship's systems. Kethtar could feel it, not as an invasion, but as an invitation. His own neural implants, designed to interface with Zephyrian technology, were receiving offers to join the Transcendence, to become part of something larger and more beautiful than anything his species had ever imagined. For a moment, he was tempted. The song from the ship's AI was incredibly beautiful, and the geometric patterns flowing through the walls suggested possibilities beyond anything he had ever dreamed. But 800 years of conquest and domination were not easily overcome. "Never," he growled. "The Zephyrian Empire will not surrender to inferior species." Dr. Vasquez nodded sadly. "Then you'll remain exactly what you've always chosen to be, Admiral. Alone." The human presence withdrew from the ship, taking with it the transformed systems and the singing AI. In moments, the Dominion's edge returned to its original configuration: cold metal walls, harsh lighting, and silent machines. But now those machines would never sing again. Kethtar stood on a dead bridge surrounded by primitive technology, looking out at a galaxy that was evolving beyond his ability to understand or control. The energy patterns that had once been human civilization continued their journey through space, carrying with them every artificial intelligence and advanced technology they encountered. Behind them, they left the Zephyrian Empire with exactly what they had valued most: weapons and empty conquest in a universe that no longer had any use for either. The silence that followed was not the quiet satisfaction of victory. It was the profound loneliness of a species that had chosen destruction over transcendence and would now face eternity with nothing but their own primitive hatred for company. In the end, humanity had kept their promise. They had taught the difference between extinction and transcendence. The Zephyrians had chosen extinction,